everyone, and welcome to Debating Metal. I'm your host, Kenneth Dean, the Dean of Metal, and along with my co-host, Chris K., we discuss and dissect our favorite music, heavy metal. So sit back, relax, pop open a cold one, and let the debate begin. Welcome back to Debating Metal. I'm your host, Kenneth Dean, the Dean of Metal, with my co-host, Chris K. Each week, we discuss and dissect the hard rock and heavy metal bands we all know and love.
Each week, we also discuss some bands and albums you may not know that you should definitely be listening to, as well as giving you our Big Four on various bands, albums, musicians, etc.
This week on episode 13, we'll be discussing cover albums and songs. Bands covering songs by other artists has always been a thing, but since the start of the new millennium, tribute albums have exploded into a virtual day job for a lot of musicians. We'll take a look at some of heavy metal's bigger tributes and let you know what we think of them.
Later in the episode, you wanted the best, you got the best. And since we're covering cover albums this week, we're doing our Big Four cover songs. And we've also got another What Should You Be Listening To?
But before we begin, let's recap what we discussed last week on episode 12. Last week, we spoke about legacy bands, and are they nostalgia acts or are they relevant? We talked about bands like Guns N' Roses, Testament, Overkill, Anthrax, Megadeth, Queensryche, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, and Metallica. If you missed last week's episode or any of the previous ones, be sure to stream or download all our episodes from your favorite podcast platforms like Podbean, Stitcher, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. And we're also now on iHeartRadio Podcasts, so we're everywhere. And please don't forget to rate us or leave us a review. Chris, what was our Big Four last week?
Last week we picked our Big Four recent albums from the last 10 years by these legacy bands. If you want to check out our list, and you know you do, find us on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, and let us know if you liked our picks or think you can do better. Let's start things off again this week with What Should You Be Listening To? Kenneth, how about you start us off?
Okay. And for 2 weeks in a row, I am actually prepared with what should everyone be listening to.
Not enough that you called it the wrong name, but
no, it's what should you be listening to? But I think everybody should be listening to it. So, what should you be listening to? This week, I have chosen Stormtroopers of Death, SOD, as they're better known as, with their album "Speak English or Die." The album came out in 1995 on August 30th, so almost 35 years ago. The band includes Scott Ian and Charlie Benante from Anthrax, Dan Lilker, former bassist for Anthrax, who went on to form Nuclear Assault, and a person that was actually an Anthrax roadie at the time, Billy Milano, for vocals. The album is basically hailed as one of the most influential crossover albums of all time. It contains songs like March of the SOD, Sergeant D in the SOD, Kill Yourself, Speak English or Die, United Forces, and what is being hailed as one of the first songs, if not the first song, to have a blast beat in it in the thrash scene. Milk is also on that album. So that's the one thing I wanted to mention. That album was considered by many to have the first blast beats in the metal genre. So Charlie Benante has always been considered to be the first person to use blast beats in metal. Which
interesting.
Yeah. So, and the reason why I picked it is oddly enough because of the quarantine and everybody being forced to stay at home.
Including us, we're actually doing this remotely for the first time.
If you can't tell by the way this sounds, so we apologize if the sound is a little rough, but I think everyone will be able to get it. Scott Ian and Charlie Benante and Dan Lilker did a version of March of the SOD on video, and they posted it on Instagram and YouTube and all that this past week. So it was pretty cool. It got me thinking about the album, and I started listening to it, and it is definitely, there's a lot of comic relief in the album. There's a lot of tongue-in-cheek kind of stuff. There's a lot of offensive lyrics, a lot of offensive words and things, and it's done like that. But it was all done on purpose to make people think and to kind of get people just to laugh, to think how outrageous it was. It's a really a strange, sometimes it's a tough listen, but I must say, You got 21 songs in 28 minutes. It's only a half hour long, so I think most people can get over it pretty quickly. Chris, what do you got?
Well, I was going to ask you. You're
Yeah.
a big fan of SOD.
Mhm.
What's the deal with MOD? The kind of it's the same singer.
Right. Billy Milano spinned off. He made MOD, which is Method of Destruction. And essentially, he kind of took the same model, which was just having these really outrageous lyrics, and just put it to. His is not as thrashy, but it's metal. It's like almost like surfer metal. There's a lot of. I don't listen to him as much. I listened to him a long time ago. I have one of their albums, but I never really got too deep into it because this one was hardcore punk. His was more like, I guess, California punk, and crossover with surfer and crossover with metal.
So they use the same image though, like the same character. I guess it was just because he couldn't perform while Anthrax was touring, so he just got approval to do that, or
the you talking about the Sergeant D guy?
Yeah.
I don't know if for Method of Destruction he didn't use the same exact guy, but it's something similar. In his particular case, yeah, it was like that. I mean, the band really was meant to be a one-off because they had basically some leftover time in the studio, and they just said let's bang this out, and they came up with 21 stupid songs, for the most part.
Yeah.
And they're not really stupid songs, but you have a 3-second song called Diamonds and Rust, which is basically the main chord to the song Diamonds and Rust. He goes, Diamonds and Rust, and that's the whole song. And then he's got the Ballad to Jimi Hendrix, which is a takeoff of something that sounds like a Hendrix song, and then he says, You're dead, and the song's over. So you get these really outrageous and small, short songs. But then they have other, the main riff to March of the SOD was the introduction to the Headbangers Ball for many years. And they used a couple of other songs from the album as part of the commercial breaks when they were going out to commercial. It's had its place in history, in metal history, but it's, Billy wanted to do it more, and that's why he came up with Method of Destruction.
Gotcha. Just so you maybe didn't even think about this, but you just did a cover of Diamonds and Rust.
Do I have to pay for that? It's only 3 seconds.
All right, so my pick this week it's going to be from the lead singer of As I Lay Crying, Tim Lambesis, and that is sorry, As I Lay Crying is my joke name for As I Lay Crying, but so it's going to be an album. Well, I'd say an EP by a project he did before he went to jail called Pyrithian. And it is one of the heaviest freaking things I've ever heard in my life.
Well, I didn't even know he did that.
What's that?
I didn't even know he did that.
Yeah, a lot of people don't, and that's why I'm talking about it.
Okay.
The first track is called The Invention of Hatred. And the whole thing is, he says, am I the invention of hatred, or was hatred born in me? And it's just from there, like, just beats the crap out of you while you're listening to it. And it was mind-blowing how awesome it is. I still love listening to it now, even though it's only 3 songs. Unfortunately, it got derailed because of his legal troubles, and I'm sure you guys know about it. And if you don't, then I would look it up online. I kind of take the view that, when you go to jail, you take your time, or you do your time, you get out, you're given a second chance, and hopefully he stays on the straight and narrow and continues to make music for the people that really support him and love him. Yeah, I love that album. I wish there was more. I would like for him to get back with the guys. He played with a lot of guys from Allegion and The Famine, which I'm not super familiar with either of those bands, but if they get back together, I'd love to hear more.
That's pretty interesting, because I know the band, As I Lay Dying, when they basically quote unquote broke up when he went to jail, they made their own band called, if I'm not mistaken, it was Woven War.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they've made 2 releases. I know they got one, and I have it. And the vocals, it was a little bit, I guess, more proggy than As I Lay Dying. because obviously As I Lay Dying is more of a metalcore act. But to me, it wasn't metalcore because the vocals weren't like that, or they weren't that drastic. But I thought it was pretty good stuff, and I was expecting more from it. But then, it kind of, I guess they got side railed, or maybe they had their own legal troubles. I don't know. But then when Tim got out of jail,
they got back together.
He basically apologized to the band sincerely, and then they got back together. So, and off they went. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, he does other side projects. He does, what's the Terminator-themed one? Austrian Death Machine, which has all Arnold Schwarzenegger-themed music.
Telling me
I'll
about
probably
that
talk about that at some point later. But yeah, he's done 3 albums that are all themed with Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, and they're freaking awesome. Well, why don't we get started on the main topic?
All right, cool. Well, our main topic this week is cover albums and songs. The first one we're going to pick is a pretty good one. It's Ronnie James Dio's tribute album, or the tribute album to Ronnie James Dio, called This Is Your Life. And there's the regular album that came out in the United States. It's got 14 tracks. I have to say, it's only because of the way the music industry is now, where there's not a lot of bands on a lot of labels, or just because even though they're on all these different labels, there's a lot of agreements that they're okay to share or to play on other albums, because exposure nowadays is the main key. But there are a lot of good bands on this tribute album.
I really like this tribute album as a whole.
Yeah, I'm amazed at how many good. They're all named people for what it is. I mean, you're talking about Anthrax, Tenacious D, Adrenaline Mob, Hailstorm, Motorhead, Scorpions, Killswitch, Metallica.
And you got Corey Taylor on there from Slipknot.
Right, and you got Corey Taylor, you got Glenn Hughes, you got Rob Halford.
Glenn Hughes, yeah.
There are some pretty big names on this, and they really, I mean, I don't know if it was, well, I would say the motivation behind it was because their dear friend Ronnie James Dio passed away,
Yeah, and didn't his wife arrange a lot of this? Like,
yes.
Get it, not arrange like the music, but
she got it all. She put it all together. Yeah, she's like the executive producer of it. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here with these bands, and it's really, really cool. I mean, the Anthrax song is awesome. Tenacious D won a Grammy for their version of The Last in Line.
It's amazing. It made me want to hear Jack Black sing more serious. I would love to hear Jack Black do a cover album because it's so good.
But what's so cool about that song is, even as much as they were paying tribute to Ronnie, they brought out their own sense of humor by putting a flute solo into the song.
But it sounds so good.
It fits so well. I mean, it's very similar to the actual guitar solo that went in there at the beginning, at least. But it's just so funny. I mean, when I first heard it, I was like, "This is genius. This is genius to have the flute solo in there." Who would have thought of that? And it worked, and that was what was awesome about it.
I always thought it was funny that Adrenaline Mob does the Mob Rules. Like it's kind of patting themselves on the back while at the same time doing a tribute to Dio.
I never thought of that, but now that I put 2 and 2 together, that probably has a lot to do with it, why they picked that song.
I mean, it's a great song, and somebody had to cover it. If not them, then I know Tom Morello is a huge fan of that song in particular, and I've somehow never all this time heard him do a cover, so I would love to hear him do the cover if it doesn't already exist.
Of Tom Morello doing Mob Rules? That would be pretty interesting, because he's got such a fantastic take on cover songs. Yeah,
and he's talked about that one so many times. It's one of his favorite songs, so I just want to hear that. So we were on number 4, or track 4 was Rainbow in the Dark.
Yeah, Rainbow in the Dark is pretty cool.
Corey Taylor and
Corey Taylor's a great
friends.
singer. Can't take anything away from him. I mean, the stuff he does with Stone Sour, when you can hear his regular voice, is quite incredible. And he's got some really cool players in the quote-unquote band that recorded this. I mean, Roy Mayorga on drums and Satchel.
Russ Parrish.
He doesn't like to go by that name.
No, but I actually really like this version of the song. I love the guitar work specifically, but I'm a big fan of Steel Panther too.
Yeah, he's
and the Fight album he appeared on.
Yeah, the Fight album he was on. I mean, that's like a razor blade of guitar playing on there. It's just so vicious sounding. Hailstorm, Straight Through the Heart. I don't have a lot to say about Hailstorm. They are very good at making cover albums. They've done 3 cover EPs as well. They've done some really cool songs on those EPs. They did It's So Easy from Guns N' Roses. They've done, I think, if I want to say they did Hell Is for Children from Pat Benatar.
Who hasn't?
Well, at least
I think Children of Bodom did one too.
Oh,
I like that version. Yeah.
Is that the Pat Benatar version? That's funny.
Uh-huh.
So they're pretty good at doing covers as well. And then of course our friends in Motorhead did Starstruck, and I believe that was done before Lemmy died. So Lemmy just played bass on it while Bill Byford from Saxon sang.
Biff Byford.
Bill. Biff Byford. I don't know why I called him Bill. Anyway, I mean, Motorhead did that song. That was pretty cool. I mean, a typical Motorhead version of a song.
Scorpions doing Temple of the King is awesome.
Yes, I was going to say that too, because I was like, I wasn't real familiar with that song. I know it's a Rainbow song. That era of Rainbow with Ronnie, I know the hits that he's done, but I didn't know a lot of the deeper tracks. And so that one's it was really good. Scorpions did a great job on that. Doro with Egypt, The Chains Are On. It's pretty decent. I mean, I like Doro.
Yeah, it's not one of my favorites on the album. It's all right. I don't dislike it. It's not one of those ones I like skip to.
Right.
But
now I like Killswitch Engage's version of Holy Diver. I've heard that before, and that is a really cool version. I mean,
it's with the better singer from Killswitch, the Howard Jones, I believe his name is.
Yeah, Howard Jones. I like the way he sings. He sings very well. I like this version a lot. I don't know, something about the double bass in it just brings out a lot in that song. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, Catch the Rainbow's cool because it's a lot of Dio's band members playing. You got Simon Wright, Craig Goldie, Rudy Sarzo, guys that played with him.
Isn't that the last band that was together for Dio? Weren't those guys?
I don't know.
Because I know Rudy was his last bass player. I know Simon was his last drummer. I believe Scott and Craig were his last, keyboard and guitar player.
It might be. And it's a good version of the song too. With Glenn Hughes is on point with that one.
Oh, Glenn Hughes, for everything that he's been through, and as old as he is, his voice is still amazing. So he's a special person. Now, the song "I" from Oni and Jimmy Bain and Rowan Robinson, some other alumni from Dio, I'm not familiar with it that well. The song doesn't really catch me overall, so I'm not.
That was the final lineup of
so that was
Dio.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they just added Glenn Hughes on vocals.
Yep.
So the Oni song, again, it's not. I have nothing good or bad to say about it. I'm just not familiar with it, and I'm not a fan of this particular song.
It's very good musicians, but yeah, it's not a song that really sticks out to me.
Yes, it seems like it's so deep a track, it was almost kind of like insignificant.
Yeah,
that's the
Man on the Silver Mountain, though.
Now that version, I would have liked it to be a little bit more upbeat, a little bit quicker, but Rob Halford, he just does. His vocals are just crazy good.
Yeah, it's somewhere in between the Dio live version that's on. God, which album was it that they released that on? Was that the?
Was it you talking about the final vinyl from Rainbow?
No, the live version from the Dio.
Oh. I don't know which one.
I know it was on the very Beast of Dio. If you had that compilation, I like that name. And then, but there's that version where it's very fast, very quick paced, and very heavy. And then the original version of Man on the Silver Mountain was on the first Rainbow album, and it's slow.
Yeah.
This was kind of somewhere in between those two as far as pace goes. But Rob's voice is amazing. You got Vinny Appice.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm thinking Carmine. It's Peachy. Or Appet.
No, Carmine.
Carmine is Peace.
His
actual name is Appice.
Their sister uses the actual name. Appice.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So anyway, you got Rob Halford, Vinny Appice, Jeff Pilson, Doug Aldrich on drums,
Scott Warren on keyboards.
Yeah, it's very good.
So that's more alumni from Dio, except for Rob, because Jeff played with him for a while. Vinny, and obviously was the first Dio drummer, and Doug played a couple albums. So that's an awesome version. Now we get to Metallica. Now, of course, Metallica's always got to be different for whatever reason.
Did I say Doug Aldrich on drums? I don't know why I said that.
I don't know, but it would be Vinny on drums, Doug on guitar.
Yeah, on guitar. I don't. Had an aneurysm there.
Wake up. Anyway, Metallica, they always have to be different. Even on their own cover album, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, they can't seem to pick one song, so they decided to choose 4. And but I must say, they picked 4 really good songs, and they did a really killer version of it. I wish they could have just chosen one song and played it all the way through and done a killer version of that one song, but what they did by taking the highlights of these 4 songs and mashing them together was still pretty good. Can't take that away from it. It was a pretty good. I mean, it's not the greatest cover of those 4 songs, but it was very good in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a lot of songs off of Rainbow Rising, and which is my favorite Rainbow album. So there's no complaints there. I kind of feel the same way as you do. I'd love to hear like a full song to fruition, rather than just bits of 10 minutes out of the album, which really is just a small chunk out of those songs. Right,
exactly. And then the album finishes with the Dio track, This Is Your Life. It's, like I said, it's one of the better cover albums out there, and to have so many names on it, it's incredible. I was amazed at all the names that are on this, because this is not your typical cover album where you have a few really big names and then you have a lot of minor names. That happened to Kiss in the 90s when they did their Kiss My Ass tribute. They had a couple big names, but then everybody else was kind of like more modern rock. I don't know, it was weird. If you think about it, the 2 names that are, actually the one name is probably least known would be Tenacious D. But if everybody knows Jack Black is in that band, then it's not as unknown.
Yeah.
All right, so our next album that we're going to pick, as we mentioned, is Metallica's Garage Incorporated. Now this
we're going to do the whole thing. We're going to do
we're just going to
one and
we're going to skip over. I mean, essentially, Garage Incorporated is a 2 CD or 2 or 4 LP album. CD 2 being all the old cover songs that they did throughout the years up until that point, and then disc 1 was basically a brand new cover album with new songs that they had picked and lots of different artists. Everyone kind of knows what they did in the past, with the 598 EP, Garage Days Revisited. A lot of people didn't understand why I said revisited, and that's because the first Garage Days Revisited that they put out was the Am I Evil and Blitzkrieg B-sides to the Creeping Death single. It was just a little tiny name at the bottom that says Garage Days Revisited. It was kind of like a throwaway kind of nickname. And then when the 598 EP came out, they called it Garage Days Revisited. So, and everyone, knows about that. And so they basically put all the cover songs that they had done up to that point on disc 2. And including the what they called the Motorhead, which was the tribute to Lemmy on his, was it his 50th or 60th birthday at the time? 50th birthday at the time. Yeah, that was a nice party for him. That was pretty cool. And they all dressed up as, they called themselves the Lemmys, and they all dressed up in long hair. I think they all played bass.
James kind of looked like he did in 1991.
Yeah, he did. It was weird because he still put a wig on.
He was cosplaying himself. All right, so was started off with the disc 1, which was the newer
Right.
material. Free Speech is for the Dumb by Discharge.
It's kind of repetitive.
Yeah.
I mean, and that was Discharge. Discharge, they had some really cool riffs. They were a punk band, essentially. So Free Speech for the Dumb said over and over and over and over again. It was, it's not a bad song. It's pretty cool.
Well, what's cool about this album is that it's all of their inspiration. As when James and Lars were younger, before they started the band, these are the albums they all sat down and said, we want to be like these guys. And so you can kind of hear all of that with these musics, with these songs. So you hear the inspiration throughout the entire thing. You hear little bits of what made Metallica. And so this is a lot different because it is, it's not as vocal heavy as Metallica, with their lyrics. But what it is it has a lot of attack.
Yeah, it has a lot of attack on the guitars, and that's exactly what they're known for, So it's very, very guitar heavy. And of course, second track, Diamond Head, which is one of their biggest influences that they've had. It just did another Diamond Head song because I think that's like the fourth Diamond Head song that they've either recorded or played that's publicly known.
Yeah.
So, and again,
it's electric.
Yeah, it's electric. It's a very good version. Again.
Okay. Well, I was going to mention with Diamond Head.
Okay.
That they kind of made Diamond Head more popular by playing the songs because nobody really knew who Diamond Head was.
Absolutely.
And so now they had a little bit of a resurgence because of them playing these songs on specifically this album, re-releasing the ones that they had already recorded, and then this song just kind of gave Diamond Head a little bit of a resurgence. You saw their albums on more shelves at that time than they probably had ever been.
Yeah,
and then
that's
they disappeared again.
Yeah, I mean, Diamond Head, unfortunately, I think they couldn't get out of their own way. And I think there was a falling out between the two main guys, Sean Harris and Brian Tatler.
Yeah.
That being said, I mean, yeah, Metallica basically...
The first album has some great songs. It's just, it takes a little bit of getting used to with the singing.
Yeah, I mean, but again, that is the new wave of British heavy metal. I mean, that was just the way it sounded. It was kind of... The vocals were ultra clean. There wasn't nothing gnarly about it. And then they had these...
They're moaning.
That, and on top of that, like, the way it was recorded, it's thin sounding. It just that's the way the new wave of British heavy metal was. I mean, because the whole movement was almost like this big wave of demos. That's the way they all sounded. And as each band slowly but surely got signed, those bands kind of went away from that sound because they actually now had the opportunity to do things the right way. I mean, every band. I mean, Iron Maiden changed. Def Leppard obviously went in a different direction. Zaxxon changed. Certain bands like Angel Witch didn't change. They stayed in that same vein only because their budgets didn't really grow much. They didn't get signed to big labels. Venom was part of that scene, but they created their own path to the dark side.
Well, that being said, I mean, I didn't think that album sounded bad. I mean, I used to listen to it a lot, especially in high school when I got my hands on it.
The Diamond Head one?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think it sounded bad at all. I mean, it had clean production for the most part. You had a little bit of the static sound behind it.
I don't think any of those albums sounded bad. They just weren't up to like major label production.
Oh no. No. But they for what they were.
Exactly.
And if you're able to go back and listen to that one, I think it's a really good idea because it's a huge indicator of where Metallica was going to develop. It's a lot of good songs. To be honest,
I think the album had 7 or 8 songs on it, and Metallica have officially recorded, I want to say 4. I know for 3. I mean, we're talking about Helpless, Am I Evil, and It's Electric. I don't think they ever. Oh no, there was another song.
They did the Prince.
The
didn't
Prince,
they?
right?
Yeah.
So that's 4. So that's 4 official songs. Now, "Sucking My Love" was a song they used to play when they were doing the clubs when they first started, but they never officially recorded that one. So that would have been.
You can get your hands on it,
Oh,
like
yeah.
the bootleg.
Right,
yeah.
exactly. But you're talking about 5 songs from one band that they were playing consistently.
Yeah.
So it's pretty impressive that how much of an influence Diamond Head had on Metallica.
And then we got Sabre Cadaver, which is it is Sabre Cadaver, but it's got a little bit of a national acrobat in there, where it breaks down to that song and then goes back to Sabre Cadaver to end it. So another medley, really.
Yeah, and of course that's what Metallica is becoming famous for when it comes to their covers, doing medleys. And they did a pretty straightforward version of it. I mean, it's Metallica. Metallica's versions of songs are always incredible. They always sound good. I don't know if it could have been maybe a
probably
little
my favorite
heavier.
Black Sabbath album from the Ozzy era.
Oh, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, is that the one?
Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting choice of songs. I mean, I would thought maybe Metallica could have done a heavier song, but nonetheless, it's still a pretty good version.
But what it sticks out to me about this one is it's a very groovy song. The whole album's very groovy for Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, and what I mean, it shows it's an indicator of where they were going to go at some point again. The Metallica adapted a more groovy sound in the '90s, and this is definitely in the same vein.
Right, exactly. You hit the nail on the head by talking about the groovy stuff, because that was their whole '90s, just having that groove, being in the pocket, as they like to call it.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next song, "Turn the Page" from Bob Seger. That's definitely a James Hetfield influenced pick. He grew up listening to a lot of that kind of classic rock stuff in the '70s, and that is a really good version, a really good song in general, but it's a really good version. I love what they do, because they take a part of the original song and it's now being done. I think it was on keyboards in the original, but Kirk plays it on guitar on this version. He does a really good impersonation, I guess, if you could say, on his guitar work. It's just incredible on "Turn the Page."
Yeah, no, it's not a heavy song. It's a rock song, but it's, again, you can take elements out of it and say, this is the same kind of conceptual writing that is used on songs like "Wherever I May Roam," stuff like that. The same kind of concept. They're telling a story. And that's probably what's the inspiration here of why it's on the album.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I mean, it's not a heavy song in general, but they kind of put a heaviness to it. It had their version of the song has such an edge to it. And when you see the video is about a woman who is basically a club dancer, stripper, prostitute, who's living with her daughter in the hotel room, and basically gets the crap beat out of her by one of her Johns. And it's a very deep video. It has that edge. The whole album, the whole song, the video and the song just has this edge to it that's just kind of like it rose the I forgot what the word is, but it brought the song to another level, essentially, in my opinion.
All right, so the next song is "Die Die My Darling" by the Misfits.
Another Misfits cover, the second one they've done, and it's a good cover. I mean, it's a Misfits song. I mean, there's not a lot to Misfits songs. I don't have a problem with the Misfits as far as their songs are concerned. I don't know too much about the Misfits, so what I do know is all the stuff that's basically out there in public: "Attitude," "Green Hell," "Last Caress," "Die Die Die My Darling," and a couple of other songs there.
I have more history with the Misfits for sure. But I really like this version. It's very heavy, and it's, you know, it's kind of the more horror end of things. The Misfits, their lyrics are all shock value, and that's kind of what's probably, as young men, they were probably inspired by that.
Cliff Burton was a big fan of the band. I mean, you could tell by that, by the fact that he had that Fiend tattoo on his shoulder, on his arm. So they definitely had their place in Metallica's influences. It's a cool song. I like it. If I'm not mistaken, they opened up their Garage Incorporated shows in New York City with that song. So that was pretty cool. Back then, they did a whole concert in New York City. I don't know if they did several shows or not, but I know that one was an MTV show, and they basically played this entire album and several other covers that they had done. And that was it. There was no Metallica songs played at that show.
Okay.
That was pretty cool.
Did they play the next one, Loverman?
No. Thank God. I'm not a fan of this song at all.
It had only come out a couple years before.
Yeah, that's
interesting.
A later influence, and I guess that had a lot to do with where James's head was at in the 90s, music-wise. Again, I'm not big on Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. I'm not putting them down. It's not my kind of music. Never has been. I knew people that used to like Nick Cave. It's not my thing. The song, not my thing. James likes it. You know what? That was James's way of sticking it to Lars and Kirk when they made him dress up all weird in front of in the Load album. So
Interesting. I didn't know that.
No, I'm just thinking that. I'm just thinking that out loud, because I can't see Kirk and Lars being into the song, but I could be wrong because there are lots of different influences that Kirk has that might not necessarily be out there. So, but we move on to Merciful Fate, which is a medley of Merciful Fate songs, and I think you and I have a differing opinion on this song. I love this song. I love this song. I love what they do with it. I love the sound of it. It's one of my favorite cover songs that Metallica has done, and it's a cover medley.
I hate to say it, but for the longest time, this is one of the reasons I didn't listen to King Diamond, because I just didn't like the version that they played. It's not like it's not heavy, and it's not. I don't know. It just didn't do anything for me, and for the longest time, I didn't listen to him. And now this last year, I started listening to Merciful Fate and King Diamond, and I'm like, damn, why did I wait so long to start listening to him?
No, and it's understandable. I mean, it's not the same thing. Obviously, vocally, it's completely different.
Completely different.
Yeah, but I just like. I'm a Metallica fan. I'm not gonna. Obviously, I'm not gonna deny that, and it's on my sleeve. I like this version. There's not much that I can say to or anyone can say I don't or I won't. It's a really cool version. I love the songs that they chose. I think they chose the right songs off that first album because some of the songs that they left off don't fit into this whole medley. So
yeah, and they did a quarter of the album.
Yeah.
Because the album's only 40 minutes and the song's 11 minutes and 11 seconds. So they did a whole quarter of that album in one medley.
Yeah, so it's a cool. In my opinion, it's a cool one. You don't like it as much. And now, what is it that you don't like about it? Is it the vocals or the riffing?
I just don't like the reinterpretation of the music. Maybe it's just the whole mix. It's everything. I just didn't like as much, and it just didn't do anything for me. I don't know a better way to put it than that, and I wish I had a better explanation, but I don't.
Okay, I accept.
All right, so I have to say this. On the video that I'm seeing, I saw you have the Kiss poster on your wall, and everything is darkened up because it's nighttime while we're recording this. And I just saw, like, behind you moved your head, and I saw I think it's Gene Simmons' face. Yeah, it's Gene Simmons, but I just barely saw it, and I see Ace's face but it's so blurred out that it looked like a dude was behind you with his hand. It was kind of horrifying for a second.
Yeah, I could see that because it's all black except for their faces.
Yeah, it's blurred out just a little bit, so it looked like someone was appearing behind. Anyway.
Anyhow, that's pretty cool.
Astronomy.
Yeah, I don't know what to say. It's right up there with Loverman for me.
I like Astronomy. I really like the version, and I not a huge Blue Oyster Cult fan, but they have a few songs I like Godzilla, and that's about it.
Don't Fear the Reaper.
Don't Fear the Reaper is a classic. I mean, everybody loves
the other song that was a big hit for them in the '80s. Burning for You. I thought that was a pretty cool song.
Burning for You was a cool song. But Astronomy, I knew the song going into listening to it for the first time and on Metallica's Garage Incorporated. But what I like is towards the end, it's such a long build-up of a song. Yeah, it has a really cool riff at the end. And I again, it's one of those where you can get elements out of what they were inspired by listening to the whole song.
Maybe I'll give it another chance. I haven't heard that one since I first bought the album.
It's a really long build-up. It really doesn't get good until like the last 2 minutes.
And that might be why, because
Yeah. I like the whole thing, but like the awesomeness really comes out in the last 2 minutes. I think
the one thing that modern day Iron Maiden has taught me is that you kind of have to let a song build, and it could get better by the end. But sometimes, the attention span was like, look, you're 4 minutes into the shit. If it doesn't get any better, I'm not listening to this song. And maybe I'm scarred because M. Night Shyamalan did these movies where you're 2 hours into it, you got about 10 minutes left, and you're like, oh, hey, what's going on? What where's the point? And it never went anywhere. So he's done a few movies like that, and sometimes the songs feel that way to me too.
Yeah.
And so I will give this one another chance and see how that goes.
Yeah. So the next one is probably one of my favorites on the first disc, is Whiskey in the Jar.
That's a cool song. And it's such a different version than the way Thin Lizzy did it.
Which I like their version too.
I like Thin Lizzy's version a lot too. But this one's a little bit more upbeat, a little bit quicker. And when I say upbeat, it's not just the tempo, but it's a little bit, I don't know, Thin Lizzy's was a little sadder, I guess you could say. Because, these are traditional Irish songs, or Irish drinking songs, if you want to look at it that way.
Yeah.
So Metallica's was almost more like a party song. The way they recorded theirs, and it's a pretty cool song. I like it. They still do it to this day. They did it. Metallica's putting out Metallica Mondays right now, and so they played a version. The first concert that they played on YouTube, it's called Metallica Mondays on YouTube, was from Slane Castle in Ireland, and they played Whiskey in a Jar as one of the cover songs that they play in concert. So that was pretty cool.
Well, one thing about this song was it also made me, because I had only ever heard The Boys Were Back in Town, and it was so overplayed. It's a cool song, but it's on so many things. I think it was even on like Toy Story, and
that's the only Thin Lizzy song you had ever heard?
At that point,
okay.
Yeah, because I you kind of listen to what your parents listened to. They didn't really listen to Thin Lizzy or anything, but when I heard this, I got really into them. I started listening to a lot of their material. It opened my eyes. So a lot of times that's what's cool about these cover albums is they make you take note and notice of other bands. Oh,
definitely. Absolutely. That's, listening to the early Metallica songs. That's how I went and listened to Diamond Head and to Budgie, especially Budgie, because when you listen to Budgie and you go, oh, wow, they're so different from what Metallica did. It is, and they had such a different sense of humor. You kind of like think to yourself, how did Metallica or anybody really listen to this at the time? But they were in the early 70s. They were a pretty heavy band. Even vocally, Budgie didn't have heavy vocals, but the music itself was real heavy. Getting back to the point, you got opened up to Thin Lizzy, which is cool. I like that. That's pretty neat. I'm not.
All right, so there's.
Oh, go on.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I'm still not deep into Thin Lizzy, but they're, because of songs like Whiskey in a Jar and other bands doing, like Bon Jovi doing The Boys Are Back in Town. I did go back and listen to some stuff, but I still never got deeply into them, just because I was more of a metalhead, and I wasn't, at the time I wasn't expanding myself. But I later learned how to expand myself when I started working in a record store.
If you want to get into them, one good one, and I had a struggle not listing them on my live albums. I just didn't really. They're just not as heavy as some of the other ones, and they're not as I just like the other ones a little bit better. But Live and Dangerous is a really good live album, and it has a good a smattering of all their good songs, their hits, and would be a great starting point for anybody.
Excellent.
All right, so there's 2 more songs on the first disc. And that was Tuesday's Gone and The More I See.
One of the cool things about Tuesday's Gone is that Metallica brought in a lot of friends to play on this song. And the one that stands out to me the most is that they brought in John Popper from Blues Traveler to play on this song with them. So that was cool. And I think they had some of the guys from Lynyrd Skynyrd play with them as well.
They had Gary Rossington.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody else was from other bands. They had Pepper Keenan, Les Claypool, Jerry Cantrell, Jim Martin. But I think the only person from Lynyrd Skynyrd was Gary Rossington.
Okay, I didn't know who was from Lynyrd Skynyrd who came and played with them. I hadn't seen the list of the players in a long time.
Okay.
But I knew that there was someone from Lynyrd Skynyrd, and I knew Popper was on the song. I didn't know who the other players were. I knew that they had brought in a bunch of guys to play on that song.
Yeah, I only knew this song from what was that movie with Adam Sandler, where he was a golfer. That was at the beginning of the movie, and that's where I knew the song from.
I don't know what song.
Not Billy Madison. Happy Gilmore.
Oh, Happy Gilmore. Okay. I had heard the Lynyrd Skynyrd version just kind of growing up. It would play on the radio, but I wasn't super familiar with it. And I like their song, their version of it. It's a lot looser because they're just kind of jamming in the studio. So there's nothing bad about it. Not one of my favorites. That's for sure. Now, The More I See is a pretty cool song, but again, it's one of those. It's discharged, so it's just a lot of chugging guitars over and over again.
But what's kind of cool is it's like a bookend.
Exactly,
the first album starts with Discharge, Free Speech for the Dumb, and then ends with The More I See. They're from 2 different albums, but by the same band, and it's kind of a good way to bookend it.
Yes, it was definitely a cool way to bookend the album. Well, now that brings us to Nativity in Black, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Those are Black Sabbath tribute albums. This is probably the next best collection of songs or artists. Let me say that. It's probably the next best collection of artists on a tribute album where, again, record companies allowed these artists to participate. And so there was a lot of good participation on these 2 albums. A lot of big names, especially in the heavy metal world. Whereas the Ronnie James Dio, a lot of heavy metal ones, but at the same time, there was a lot of his 2 of the songs were with his bandmates. So this one, I mean, you're talking about Biohazard, White Zombie, Megadeth, Sepultura, Cathedral, Godsmack, Pantera, Soulfly. I mean, there's a lot of big names on these 2 albums. So let's do a breakdown of what we got here. First, Nativity in Black starts off with Biohazard doing After Forever. And that, I gotta tell you, that's pretty close to the original until it kind of starts doing a little bit of almost like a rap.
Yeah, to me, like when I heard it, I was like, "This is all right," and then it took a kind of a sharp turn and almost turned me off the album.
Yeah, you didn't know what to expect after. I mean, because it starts off exactly like the original. and then the first maybe 10 seconds, and then when it goes into the breakdown, all of a sudden it's like it's if Biohazard, they're kind of like a New York hardcore metalcore rapish band. It goes into that, but it's not a bad version. I mean, when you listen to the original After Forever, obviously Ozzy's vocals are very different from the way Biohazard does them, but it's not a terrible version. But I can see how it could turn you off when you first get past that intro.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Children of the Grave, which was White Zombie, didn't do a lot more to salvage that for me either, because
I know that's your favorite song, so you didn't like White Zombie's version?
It's not that I didn't like it. It took a little bit of getting used to, because it's Rob Zombie doing Children of the Grave. He's in White Zombie, heavier, more rock than Rob was later on in his career, but still it's that kind of industrial kind of sound to it, and I don't know, it just didn't.
I know what you mean, because that's one of the songs I don't typically listen to when I listen to this album. Basically, Children of the Grave and Supernaut from Thousand Homo DJs. I don't listen to those two very often. But unfortunately, sandwiched in between those two songs is a really cool version of Paranoid from Megadeth.
By Megadeth? Yeah.
That's a pretty cool version.
I like that one a lot. Yeah. I actually have it on a couple playlists I have.
And the other thing, too, that I like about that is that, at the end, there's a little bit of levity, I guess you can see, because Nick Menza doesn't stop playing. So he's yelling at Nick to stop, which is pretty cool. I like that was left in there.
Yeah, that was very cool. Because, I mean, let's be honest, Paranoid is just a very repetitive riff.
Right, exactly.
But it's so good that you don't care.
Absolutely. It's a real simple song, but it's really cool. We already mentioned Thousand Homo DJs with doing Supernaut. Not a lot to say about it. I'm not a big fan of that version, so we can skip that if you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only notable thing worth mentioning is that 1,000 Homo DJs was the guys from Ministry.
Yeah, which is that's weird.
Yeah, obviously the name isn't very PC anymore. So, but Iron Man, it's hard to judge because it's Ozzy.
Yeah, it's Ozzy singing it. Therapy. I mean, it's just basically Ozzy covering his own song. It's almost like any Ozzy Osbourne song or version that he does, live. I mean, Therapy does a good job with the music. It's and it's Ozzy singing. I mean, Ozzy does a couple of songs. He also later on does NIB with Primus, and again, Primus does a great job of the music, and Les Claypool playing that intro bass of Basically at the beginning. It's super cool, but it's again Ozzy doing a version of his own song. It's almost kind of pointless. Why is Ozzy here?
I'm here because Sharon made me.
Basically, she just drove him up, kicked him out of the car, and said, "Here, go record."
Yeah.
Lord of This World from Corrosion of Conformity. What do you think of that version?
I can take it or leave it.
Yeah, it's one of those where it's like, all right, the Corrosion of Conformity being one of the lesser names, I guess you could say, on this album. I mean, it's an okay version. Nothing to write home about. The one I would write home about is the next version, Sepultura's Symptom of the Universe. That is one killer version of that song.
It's back when Max was still in the band. It's very heavy.
I like the way they kind of change up the drum rhythm a couple times throughout the song. It's really, really cool. Max, in the way he sings, it takes some getting used to. It's a different cup of tea, but the version of that song is so good. And then at the end, they end it very similar to the way the original ends, which is a little acoustic guitar outro, and it's really, really cool. So I mean, the playing on that song is awesome.
I'm interested to hear what you think of the next one, because I know that's your favorite.
The Wizard?
Black Sabbath album. I mean, Black Sabbath song.
Bullring Brummies, that version of The Wizard is amazing to me. I love that version. To the point where there's parts of the song that I hear in my head that come from this version as opposed to the original. Rob
Really?
Yes.
I like it. I don't even know who Bullring Brummies is.
Rob Halford on vocals, Geezer on bass, and Bill Ward on drums.
Okay.
And then it has Wino on guitar, where he's a guitar player for Vitus and Obsessed. There's some association, I thought, with Motorhead, but I could be wrong. And then the fight guitar player that took over for Russ Parrish, Brian Tilse, was the other guitar player on the song.
Okay. Interesting.
So, according to this cover of The Wizard is the only official recording by the band.
Well, that explains why it sounds so awesome, because, it's Bill Ward and Geezer Butler.
Half of Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
But unlike Ozzy doing his own song, because Ozzy's the singer, it's so recognizable. You can't tell that Geezer and Bill are playing on the album. Because I seriously think that Bill does a better job on this version of the song than he does on the original.
Well, he had been playing for some amount of time since 1970s. So
yeah. I mean, to me, it's a killer version. I mean, I love it.
All right.
I could talk all day about that song.
Oh, sorry.
Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath.
Like you stopped talking.
No, it's okay. Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath.
Oh yeah, it's Bruce Dickinson.
Dickinson.
Yeah, hell yeah.
I like that song a lot. Godspeed was a band at the time. It was like a new band. They had been around for a couple of years. I actually have their first album. But Bruce basically came in to do vocals with the band playing and does a killer version of Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. You can't go wrong with Bruce Dickinson. You can't go wrong with Rob Halford. So when they're singing your songs, it's going to be good.
Skunk Works.
But he sang really well.
He did. It just wasn't good. So, Ugly Kid Joe does NIB.
Yeah, it's not a bad version of NIB. If I'm not, Ugly Kid Joe had done War Pigs on one of their As Ugly as They Want to Be album. So they're big fans of Black Sabbath. Their version of NIB is pretty standard. They didn't do Basically at the beginning like Primus did, but it's a pretty standard version. There's not, nothing.
That's one of the reasons I don't really like this version that much, because I feel like you kind of have to do both.
Oh, you mean play Basically?
Yeah, it's like hearing Electric Eye without the Hellion before it. It just doesn't sound right.
Right.
You kind of have to have it.
I get what you're saying.
All right, so Faith No More does War Pigs. It's a live version.
It's a live version. It was something that was like previously released. So it's they had done War Pigs before. It's standard version.
Yeah.
His vocals are always pretty spot on. He's got that similar register to Ozzy, so there's a lot of similarities there. I don't see anything special about the song.
I kind of feel the same way.
It's nothing bad about it, but nothing special about it. But I will say... oh, no, go on. Sorry.
So, were you going to say something more about War Pigs?
No.
Okay. So what do you think of Peter Steele and Typo Negative's version of Black Sabbath?
It's the scariest song on the face of the planet. That song, his version, will scare the living shit out of you. That's what I can say. It's an excellent version. I think it's an excellent version, but it is one version that it is going to scare the bejesus out of you. Because if the song was scary to begin with, which I always thought, as a kid, it was one of those creepy songs. This song is even creepier, or this version is even creepier, just because of Peter's low tone and just the whole slowness of it. It's very evil sounding, and I love it. I mean, for the fact that I don't like the song, this version is really good.
I don't like it as much, but I mean, it's cool. I wouldn't go out of my way to listen to it myself, but I like it well enough.
Yeah, it's a scary version.
I'll be honest, by this point in listening to this, and I've only listened to this compilation a few times, I usually just kind of pick the songs out of compilations after listening to it a few times that I really like. By this point that I listen to it, I don't really remember the last few, you know?
No, I totally get what you're saying. Now, if you're talking about the ones that are coming after Black Sabbath, the original album stops at song 12. So the Cathedral
That's maybe why
versions,
I don't remember.
Yeah, the Cathedral versions actually came out on singles and promo releases. I heard them. They're okay. They're not, they're typical kind of hard. Cathedral was on the brink of almost like melodic death metal,
Okay.
So I didn't really get into their versions. I actually have them on a CD somewhere, but I never really got into them. So there's not much I can talk about them. But when you go to the second disc, Volume 2, Godsmack's version of Sweet Leaf is excellent.
See, this one, I had the first one back in the day. I had Nativity in Black. When I saw the lineup of Nativity in Black 2, I wasn't as thrilled because there's not a lot of bands that I really related to. I mean, I saw names like Busta Rhymes and System of a Down, Static X, and I was just like,
Yeah, it appealed to the new metal crowd that was out there.
Yeah.
But I mean, Godsmack's version of Sweet Leaf is excellent. Godsmack can turn a song pretty heavy. I love the way they did this version. Machine Head doing Hole in the Sky, pretty standard version, with rough vocals. I don't see anything special about it, but it's a cool version. Static X doing Behind the Wall of Sleep. It's if you know Static X and you know how industrial sounding they were cool because as industrial as they tried to be, they didn't come across as industrial, say, as a Ministry or 1,000 Homo DJs did, but they had that same sound that was on Wisconsin Death Trip, so it was a pretty cool version. Megadeth doing Never Say Die. I think it's a live version.
I like the version though.
It's cool. A cool version and a very interesting choice of songs for Megadeth to play. Again, similar how we thought it was an interesting way for Ozzy to do that song, even though he wasn't really too deeply involved with the making of that album. For Megadeth to do it was pretty cool. And like I said, it's a live version, so it's pretty cool.
I mean, it's a great song, and it's obviously the best song on that album.
Right, on the Never Say Die
meaning
album.
Never Say Die.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so Snowblind.
Snowblind. I love this version of Snowblind. I mean, I'm a fan of System of a Down. They're so unique and so different. A lot of that has to do with their Armenian heritage. It is a really cool version. It's a lot faster than the original version of Snowblind, and they do their breakdown at the end is very heavy. I like it a lot. But it takes some getting used to because it's such a quick-paced song. Electric Funeral from Pantera. Really cool version. I mean, there's not much you could say. Pantera makes just about everything cool.
Yeah, it's a great version.
It's a great version. Very similar. Now, similar in greatness. The version that they did of Planet Caravan on their Far Beyond Driven album is so haunting. It's a really, really cool version. I like that version a lot. I don't listen to it a lot, but I like it a lot. Kind of weird to say it that way, but it's a very cool version. And everything that Pantera does is, I mean, it's always good. So, Primus with Ozzy doing NIB, Les Claypool doing Basically is pretty much the highlight of this album.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I mean, he's so skilled at the bass. And the way he plays, basically, and just the extra things he puts into it is so cool. I mean, he doesn't do it funky like he does his regular Primus stuff, but he does such a really cool job on it. I like it. And then after that, it pretty much becomes standard fare for NIB with Ozzy singing on it. So
yeah,
Hand of Doom from Slayer. Again, Slayer knows how to do covers. But Hand of Doom is I don't know, not the greatest Black Sabbath song of all time.
No, but it fits with Slayer, and that's what I like about it.
Right.
It's a very Slayer song.
Exactly.
So
they picked the right song for them.
Yep.
Soulfly doing Under the Sun. Interesting
I think
choice.
it's kind of funny that Soulfly is on the second one because 6 years later, and Max had moved from Sepultura,
right,
which appeared on the first one. I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, that's ironic, I guess you could say. But I mean, their version of Under the Sun, I haven't listened to it in such a long time. I don't really remember it, so that tells you that it doesn't really stand out for me.
I don't feel like the rest of the thing, the album really stands up.
No, not at all.
Stands out to me except for the Iron Man by Busta Rhymes because, ugh.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. Yeah, the rest of the album doesn't do a lot. I mean, Head P, again, it was you're talking about new metal. Sabre Cadaver. I mean, you compare that to the Metallica version. There's no comparison. Iron Man with Busta Rhymes. It's not a cool version. I'm not a fan. And somehow Ozzy stuck himself in there. It's almost like the Post Malone crap that he's doing now. And I Hate God doing Cornucopia is, again, just a band that never really got that far in, that deep into the scene, but they're on this album. So
yeah,
overall, again, it's a great collection of bands. They pick a lot of good songs, but their versions are not necessarily awesome. Some of them are great. I mean, to me, the highlight of the second album is Godsmack, the Static X, the Godsmack, the System of a Down, and the Pantera and Primus songs. On the first album, the standout tracks, Megadeth doing Paranoid, the the Sepultura, Symptom of Universe, and Bullring Brummies with The Wizard. And Bruce's version of Black Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath is pretty incredible too. If you're a Black Sabbath fan and you like any of these bands, you're going to like these songs and these versions. Don't get us wrong when it comes to that, but there's some throwaways in there, put it that way.
Yeah, I think you could probably make one really good cover album out of the two.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely can make one good album out of the two together.
All right, so there's one cover album I really wanted to mention, and I'll go over it pretty briefly, but it's Children of Bodom's Skeletons in the Closet.
Okay,
and
cool.
What's so cool about it is it's not your typical cover album. It's got everything on there. It's got Creedence Clearwater Revival. It's got Pat Benatar, Andrew W.K., Kenny Rogers, Alice Cooper.
Kenny Rogers.
Yeah, it's got a variety of cover songs on here, including Britney Spears. But what they managed to do, like the song that they cover from Britney Spears, which is "Oops, I Did It Again," has an awesome guitar solo. I mean, awesome.
I gotta tell you, look. I mean, I've heard a couple of these versions of these songs, and they're really cool. I like them a lot. You talk about a band with a sense of humor, and they don't take themselves super seriously. I like that. I like a band who can sit there and not take themselves ultra seriously. In the end, you're out there entertaining fans. Okay, you hear all these things about when Slayer played. They weren't allowed to smile on stage because they're Slayer. That went out the window the last few tours. But a band like Children of Bodom, who plays melodic death metal, and it's so intense, and they play such fierce music, and just to have this kind of sense of humor is awesome. I love it.
Well, they play Looking Out My Back Door, and what's so fun about it is it's the same song. It's not like they just took it and made it heavy and serious, and it's still an old country rock song. I mean, and it's so funny to hear that version. But then you have other songs. Like, a lot of this is a compilation of the singles they put out over the years. You've got Somebody Put Something in My Drink, which I think was on Hate Crew Death Roll, which was their fourth album. And then they've got Silent Scream, which I had heard years before on one of the singles. Hellion, which is a great cover of from Wasp. Aces High. All these were released, over the years. So you've got a compilation of these kind of heavier songs, which all inspired them. I mean, back in the day when you looked at their website, I'm talking 97, 98, they didn't make any qualms about who inspired them. They didn't just have, Slayer and Wasp and all these heavier bands from the time. They put everybody on there that they felt like inspired them. I remember the Beatles were on somebody's list, and so when you got like She Is Beautiful is a heavier version of an Andrew WK song, which is just all party rock, and you've got Bed of Nails from Alice Cooper, which is a great version of that song. I really like it. You got King Diamond. So I mean, if you want a really fun cover album to listen to, enjoy on a road trip or something, check this one out for sure.
No, absolutely. I mean, I like their version of Aces High that they did on here. It's to almost say it's a little quicker than the original is hard, because the original was a pretty fast version. But yeah, this is a tad quicker. I like the version of Rebel Yell. It's pretty cool.
Oh, I love Rebel Yell. Yeah, it's a really good cover.
I mean, to pick a song like Talk Dirty to Me from Poison, it just tells you about the fact that they just don't take themselves seriously, and it's a really good version.
The playing is top notch, because the playing itself is really good.
Exactly.
I mean, they added an amazing guitar solo to "Oops, I Did It Again." Let me repeat that. They added an amazing guitar solo to "Oops, I Did It Again."
Exactly. I mean, how can you not enjoy something like that? I mean, that's what's really cool about it. Okay. We're at a point, so we finished discussing albums, but we are going to mention a few other titles, but we're also going to mention something else. There's a couple bands. Now, we all know that Metallica has got a history of doing cover songs, and they've basically made the careers of some of these other bands that they've covered. Like Diamond Head, they really helped their career. I mean, the guy gets paid still because of Metallica. But two bands, Iron Maiden and Anthrax, have really done a great job at covering songs and basically showing their influences and expanding the minds of their listeners. Iron Maiden have done about 20 or so cover songs, and Anthrax has done about 40. I mean, it's incredible how much stuff they've done. Every good Anthrax fan knows that they're big Kiss fans. They've recorded, if I'm not mistaken, four Kiss songs over the years. I mean, it's the most of any other band that they've covered. But they do really good versions of them. Like Metallica does really good versions of all their cover songs. These are excellent versions. And Anthrax have made two songs that are cover versions, basically a staple of their set. Got the Time.
Antisocial.
And Antisocial and Got the Time. Those are like staples of their set. It's almost, they've become Anthrax songs. So that's what's really cool about it. But I mean, they go back from their first album. They've been recording covers all the way through now. The first song they did was "I'm 18." It was a killer version, but no one knew who Anthrax was, so no one really knows who, their version of "I'm 18." But they come all the way down to now, and they do "Carry On Your Wayward Son," the Kansas song. I mean,
it's pretty awesome.
It's pretty awesome. The only thing I don't like about it is it's almost note for note. I think it's too much of the original in there.
That's fair.
Even with the keyboard playing, I'm like, I thought it would have been better if they would have done something where they replaced the keyboards with the guitar. So instead of, they could have had maybe Scott play it, or even, John Denai play the keyboard part. I think it would have made it a better version, or maybe even a little bit heavier. Although it's a killer version, can't take anything away from it. But I think it would have been better without the keyboards. It's too much like the original. But they do some killer songs over the years. I mean, they've had they released anthems a few years back. They did TNT on there from AC/DC, Jailbreak from Thin Lizzy. A couple of lighter songs. I was surprised by the Boston and Journey song on there, but Anthrax can make just about anything heavy. but it almost lends itself to how Carry On Your Wayward Son was done. It's very, very close to the original. And I think something that Anthrax had not done before this time was make songs that close to the original.
And I don't know some of these covers, but with the Journey song, the Keep On Running?
Yeah, Keep On Running.
Keep On Running. Was that with Joey?
Yeah, that's with Joey.
I mean, that to me makes sense because Joey has such a Journey-esque voice.
Oh yeah, it makes absolute sense. But what's funny about it is
I gotta listen to it now.
It's so much like the original. It's like, when they did Phantom Lord from Metallica, their version, and that was with Bush, John Bush singing. Their version is like just a hair quicker than Metallica's version. So it has this little edge to it because it's almost like chaotic.
Yeah.
They do an excellent version of Remember Tomorrow from Iron Maiden.
Yeah, I've heard that one. That's pretty cool.
That one's pretty cool. And then their version of Dethroned Emperor from Celtic Frost. It's like, they tried to emulate. I think it was Scott singing it. Tried to emulate the distorted vocals. So and the Kiss versions. That's what's cool about what they did. The versions that they did of the Kiss songs. They just played heavier versions of it. So they kind of stayed true to the original, but since they played it heavier, it sounds like an Anthrax song. Like the version that they did on that Kiss My Ass tribute album, that version of She is awesome because it's technically, quote unquote, the live version. It has the little breakdown at the end that Kiss does live that they don't do on the actual record on Dress to Kill. So that was a cool thing that Anthrax threw in there. And then over the years, they did a cover of Bring the Noise from Public Enemy.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, that one's cool. And then they brought in Chuck D to sing with them, so it was pretty cool. And then they, like I said, they've made Antisocial and got the Time, staples into their set. Speaking of Iron Maiden, they did Anthrax did a version of Remember Tomorrow. So did Metallica, by the way. And you can, if you want to go out there and compare the two versions, they're pretty cool. And again, Metallica did a version that made it their own. Iron Maiden basically started their career doing cover songs. It was weird. They recorded one song twice. One with Paul on vocals and one with Bruce on vocals. And that's the song I've Got the Fire from Montrose.
Well, it's a great song.
It is. It's a great song. So basically what it was it was a staple of their set because they didn't have a live album, they didn't have a full-length album yet just before Iron Maiden was released in 1980. So when they were doing headline sets, to extend their set, now that they did have the album, they only had 10 songs. So they had songs that would eventually show up on Killers, plus they had cover songs. And one of the covers they played was I've Got the Fire, Killer version that they do of it. And then they properly released it in 1983 with Bruce on vocals, and that is an excellent version. Studio finished, it's proper, it's everything you want out of a song, and they do an amazing version of it.
And if you haven't listened to Montrose, their first album, do yourself a favor and pick it up because that's Sammy Hagar's first release. It is killer from beginning to end, and it's just there's so many musicians that have been inspired by that first album.
Oh yeah,
and Iron Maiden is one of them.
Iron Maiden. They've done two Montrose songs because later on in 1992 they went on to do Space Station Number 5. So they're big Montrose fans. They're big 70s classic rock fans. As you can tell, their intro song to their concert is Doctor Doctor from UFO, which is a song that they covered in 1996. So it's kind of weird that they covered a song that inspired them so much, because sometimes that's a little dangerous. That's a really, really close to home kind of cover, but they pulled it off pretty well. They were pretty standard to the song, so they didn't do anything to go out of their way to make it different.
Yeah.
But, to see their influences, they put another one of their best covers they did was Cross-Eyed Mary from Jethro Tull. That's one of their that's an amazing version, and to consider the Jethro Tull version is not anywhere near as heavy. That's a killer version, and then that's one of those songs where when I was young and you were hearing about these B-sides that they were putting out, because before Metallica was putting out B-sides, Iron Maiden was putting out B-sides, and you're like, oh, what's the next B-side going to be? Because they had done it from the beginning. They were just putting different songs, whether they were different Iron Maiden songs that were not on the album, or if they were live tracks that were not regular Iron Maiden songs, or cover songs. Iron Maiden was always putting out some sort of single, and you always wanted to go to the record store to get that import to see what was the next song.
Which is genius, because it makes you buy a song you're already going to buy on the album.
Right.
Just to get one extra cool cover.
Exactly. And
that's fantastic.
Yeah, and back then you didn't know CDs were going to take off the way they did, and you didn't know that they were going to come up with a compilation album. You didn't know how long these bands' careers were going to be. I mean, no one knew that Iron Maiden was going to be there 40 plus years later. No, nobody knew that. So for you as a kid, you're out there saying, "Hey, this is out. I'm going to get it now." Especially when it was one of those where you had to run into your record store to say, "Hey, what's next? What's the next big release? What came in from England today?" Their version of Cross-Eyed Mary is awesome. And over the years, I mean, they did a Thin Lizzy song, Massacre. They did Communication Breakdown from Led Zeppelin. So they've done a lot of really cool songs. So the one thing that we got to say about this is that for anybody listening, you go out there, Iron Maiden's your favorite band, go out there and listen to these cover songs. Go out there and listen to their influences, because you're going to pick up some cool stuff. I mean, UFO is a great band. Montrose, like you just said, their first album is incredible. Rock Candy, is everyone's favorite, drum track. You just go out there and bang away at the drums. Do yourself a favor and pick up some of these cover versions. While you're out there, you'll notice there's tons of bands that have actually full-blown cover albums. We just mentioned before Children of Bodom. Metallica has their cover album. Hammerfall has an album called Masterpieces. Arch Enemy did an album called Covered in Blood, which is a collection of all their covers.
It was just from last year, I think.
Yeah, it was released last year. So, and then you've got Hatebreed did something similar. So they're more of a metalcore type of band. So they're going to have different influences, but you're going to hear where their hardcore sound came from. But they've got a Slayer cover in there. They've got a Metallica cover in there. So they've got some really cool songs. Rage Against the Machine, they did that Renegades album. They got some really cool covers on there. Bruce Springsteen, what was the other, Cypress Hill. I mean, they've got some really interesting, it may not be everyone's taste, but it's some really cool stuff. One band I got to mention that's just done some really interesting stuff is 6 Feet Under. They have done, 4 what they call Graveyard Classics. One of the ones that they did was Graveyard Classics 2. They did a full-blown tribute to AC/DC and Back in Black. They, from front to back, they did Back in Black. If you're a 6 Feet Under fan, it's a pretty cool thing. If you're not a 6 Feet Under fan, it takes a lot of getting used to, because the vocals are so different. But musicality-wise, it's pretty cool.
Well, it's the original singer from Cannibal Corpse.
Yes.
And if you don't like Cannibal Corpse, it's going to be tough to get into this.
It's a tough listen, but part of it I find humorous because it's so growly and so deathy. But the other part said the musicianship is top notch. I mean, there's some good players on there.
Yeah.
So
what I take from all this, I mean, for me, cover albums, what made them so great to me was it inspired me to get into a lot of bands. I mean, I went on a pilgrimage at one point to find all of the albums that I could off of Garage Inc. because I liked so many of those bands. I was a big Metallica fan. They were my gateway into a lot of other metal. I've grown to like some of those bands even more than I like Metallica.
No, that's cool.
And And it's the same for all these cover albums. I mean, just learning who the bands that you love and respect, who they were inspired by, is such a big deal to their sound, to where they developed from. And so going and listening to those roots of where they came from is a chance to really listen to some great music.
Definitely, absolutely. Do yourself a favor and pick up some of these cover albums and listen to them, and then go back and listen to those bands. That's exactly what Chris said. Do yourself a favor. All right, so that brings us to the big four. We're going to do the big four cover songs. So after talking about all these covers, we're going to pick our favorite four of each of ours. So what do you got, Chris?
All right, for number 4, it's probably kind of surprising, but Bring the Noise by Anthrax.
Wow.
It's unfortunately it's what started rap.
Rap rock,
rap metal.
Yeah.
I don't know if it really completely started it. I mean, Rage Against the Machine came a little bit after that and killed it. I love Rage Against the Machine, but majority of rap rock stuff that came after it, I just can't really get into.
It definitely was one of the first. I mean, obviously Aerosmith and Run DMC doing Walk This Way together was
that's a huge one. Yeah,
that's a big one. But Anthrax, I mean, when you think about it, if you listen to the original version of Bring the Noise, they mention Anthrax in there. So there's always been that connection between those two bands. So that's the really cool thing about it. That's a pretty interesting choice. I never would have thought you would have picked that.
Well, I love that version of the song, and I'm actually a fairly big fan of Public Enemy. I like that era of rap before gangsta rap really took off. And then whatever else has followed, I just not a big fan of, especially mumble rap. I just oh my god! But that era I really enjoyed, and Chuck D just has such an amazing vocal quality, and not just his singing, but his lyrics. Right. His lyrics are so strong, and it's the same stuff you get out of a lot of metal writers, because they just have this story to tell, and he makes no qualms about what his point is, even if you don't agree with him. He's just such a strong writer. And so Bring the Noise was just a total hit for me. I remember years ago there was a Raw versus SmackDown game, and this song appeared on it, and then one of my characters that I made, this was his theme song. So
that's cool.
Heck yeah, number 4. Number 3, I'm going to pick Last in Line by Tenacious D.
Yeah.
I love that version. It's just such a good version of it. It's a beautiful tribute to Ronnie. And like I said before when we were talking about it, I wanted to hear more Jack Black singing seriously from this. I want him to release a full album of him playing metal songs. That'd be freaking fantastic.
And he's a huge metal fan too.
Oh yeah. So listen to that version, because it's no joke, even though Tenacious D is a joke band.
Yeah, like I said, there's that fact that they put the flute solo in there was humor, but it works to perfection.
But it's still played very beautifully.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Number 2, Lack of Comprehension by Obscura. That is originally a Death song. Obscura was very inspired by Death. I've mentioned this story before one time, but my friend and I went to go see a show in Houston of Obscura. What was so cool is we were sitting there talking to the lead guitarist and singer and main songwriter. Didn't even realize it was him for about 20 minutes. Until he mentioned that, after we asked him what he did with the band, he said, I'm the singer and guitarist. And it was so funny because at one point my friend George says, you sound like what Death would have been had Chuck continued living, the evolution of that sound. and it just touched him. And you can hear that in this cover of Lack of Comprehension. I mean, it's from their early days. I believe it was on the first album, the re-release of the first album, but you just hear the love in there. And for a band that I love so much, to hear somebody else playing their songs so with so much care, I have to put it towards the top of my list. The only thing that beat it was Hellion by Children of Bodom. And that's because it's on the third album, which is one of my favorites, which is Follow the Reaper. But for a while, I didn't really even realize it was cover. And it fit kind of with the rest of the album. It was a little different. But once I realized it was a Wasp song, it really got me into Wasp. I had not listened to them until the early 2000s. I mean, I had a huge back catalog to go back and listen to, and I really got into them. But it was such a great cover. I mean, I probably listened to this 1,000 times in high school.
That's a good song. I like that song, Hellion. I think that's the first song on side 2 if you have an album or a record, because the one thing about that first Wasp album, it was so distinctive, and they even say it themselves. The first side A, sounds like American metal, a very American sounding, and then you flip it over and you go into side 2. Side 2 sounds very European. There's a distinct difference between side A and side B, and that song I think starts off the side B, and that's an excellent song.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that song. I mean, so much that it was just. I think that CD was in my CD player in the high school years for a long time, because it wasn't just a great album, but it had such attitude that fit with the band, and it was what inspired Alexi. You know, his nickname is Wild Child because of Wasp. Wasp is his favorite band. And when you hear a musician playing a song by their favorite band, it can be dangerous because, like what you said before, you know, it's maybe they won't do him justice.
Yeah,
and
sometimes
it goes
it's too close to home. Mm-hmm.
But in this case, it definitely did him justice.
Cool. So that's your top 4. Well, my big 4. It's so funny because you and I, we're good friends, and we do this podcast and we talk about metal all the time. But we're so distinctively different. You're a lot more into things that I'm not into. I'm so much more mainstream than you are. But I like the fact that I can take what you tell me to listen to and listen to it, and I like it. It's not necessarily going to be my favorite, but it's something that I'm going to listen to and enjoy and make part of my playlist and stuff like that. So my list seems so much more different than yours. My number 4 is Hair of the Dog from Guns N' Roses on the Spaghetti Incident. Now,
okay,
that song, I mean, that's one of those things where you just want to turn the radio up to 11 and crank that, because the drum beat on it, the guitar, Slash playing the guitar, is just such a cool groove to that song. And that's one of the things about the 4 songs that I got. They all have some sort of really cool groove. But I love that version of Hair of the Dog by Guns N' Roses.
No, that was Nazareth, right?
Yes, it was Nazareth did the original.
That's so different sounding.
Yeah, just the way they do. I mean, obviously, Matt Sorum's using does the cowbell on there, and Slash is, you could just it's Slash in the way he plays guitar and stuff like that, and Axl just does a killer version especially with the high vocals that he does when he says son of a bitch. It's really cool version.
Yeah, and Axl has that voice that he can definitely hit that range of what was his name? Dan.
Oh, I have no clue who the singer for Nazareth is.
Dan McCafferty, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Well, we just butchered his name on there.
I apologize, Nazareth.
Now, my number 3 is Pantera's Cat Scratch Fever their cover.
Oh, that's an awesome version.
Their cover of
I didn't think
Ted,
about that one.
Yeah, the Ted Nugent song. That song is just the same as Hair of the Dog. You just turn that up to 11, you crank that, and it is awesome. And their version is pretty spot on, including the drums. But because they're Pantera, it's so heavy, and
the vocals are different.
Well, the vocals are a little different, but musically from beginning to end, it's virtually identical. But yeah.
Well, what I mean is Phil could sing it like Ted Nugent, but he had already gone off and started singing in his very distinctive style. He's capable of singing in that same range, but he didn't do like a 1-to-1 copy,
right? Which
makes it even better.
Yeah, it's a killer version. I mean, I love it. I mean, every time I pull up the Pantera's Greatest Hits CD, that song just goes right there, and I play it and crank it. It's like I listen to, when I'm driving and I listen to songs, listen to the radio, my CD, or not my CD. I don't even have a CD player in there. When I listen to my iPhone, and I have it at a certain level, that's my driving level. But certain songs will come on, and you just have to turn it up another 10 notches because you just want to blow your ears out, and you say, if I'm going to go deaf, I'm going to go deaf to listening to something really good, and this is one of those songs. All right, so number 2 is Cross-Eyed Mary from Iron Maiden doing the Jethro Tull song. Again, at the time, 1983, that comes out, as the B-side to the Trooper, just the drums on it, just the overall playing from all 5 guys, it's awesome. Bruce does an incredible version singing it. Again, it's different than the original, but at the same time, it stays true to the original, I guess you could say, arrangement to that effect. So it's pretty cool. I love the song. It's almost one of my favorite Iron Maiden songs in terms, if I'm listening to Iron Maiden, it's got to be in that playlist. So, number 1. And again, I'm sorry, 4, 3, 2, they all groove. They all have some sort of groove. And we're going to go to another song that has groove. Number 1, Am I Evil from Metallica, doing a Diamond Head song. No one knew who Diamond Head was. Metallica would play this song. Everyone thought it was a Metallica song, but it's a Diamond Head song. This is a really cool version. I don't like the way Metallica does their versions of that song now, but this version, the way it's recorded, is excellent. There's my big 4 cover songs.
All right.
There you go. Chris, that's the end of the show. Take us out. Let them know where they can hear us.
All right, well, that's it for the big 4, and that also means that's it for Debating Metal. You can listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Podbean, or wherever you consume your metal podcasts. If you enjoyed our show and agreed with our opinions or just want to rip us a new one, check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or you can email us at debatingmetal@gmail.com. Be sure to check us out next week. We'll have another awesome topic for you, and we'll also have another Big 4. On behalf of Kenneth Dean, I'm Chris K. We'll see you next week.
Stay safe and see ya.